Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
Our manager set up a system where you book your vacation requests almost a year ahead to avoid conflicts. It made sense when you think about it. With such a tight crew, having 2 or 3 people gone at once would basically shut us down. I learned this lesson the hard way during my first year when I tried to request a week off in summer with only 2 months' notice. Everything was already booked solid. Since then, I've been on top of my planning. Last January, right after the new year started, I sat down with my calendar and marked out the dates I wanted. 2 full weeks covering Christmas and New Year. I submitted the request on the second working day of January, and it got approved within 48 hours. Those 2 weeks meant everything to me. My parents live across the country, and with how expensive flights get during the holidays, I rarely make it home for Christmas, but this year I'd planned it all out. I'd saved up money for months, bought my plane tickets back in March when prices were reasonable, and my mom had been calling me every other week talking about all the things we'd do together. She even started planning the menu in October. My dad kept sending me photos of the spare room, showing how he'd set it up with new curtains and everything. So last Tuesday, my co-worker walked up to my desk right before lunch. We'd always gotten along fine, nothing special but cordial enough. She handled client accounts while I dealt with the creative side. She asked if she could talk to me for a second. I told her sure and asked what was up. She started explaining how she'd found this incredible deal for a trip to Asia. She went on about how it was once-in-a-lifetime pricing, with the flights and hotel package being almost half off. I told her that sounded great and asked when she was planning to go. That's when things got awkward. She said the dates were from December 20th through January 3rd. I felt my stomach drop. Those were my exact dates. I pointed out that I already had those weeks booked off and that I'd submitted the request way back in January. She acknowledged that she knew, but then asked me to hear her out. She wanted to know if I had kids. I said no, but asked what that had to do with anything. She explained that Christmas was really important for families. She mentioned her kids were 6 and 8, and that they deserved to have their mom around for the holidays. She suggested I could just take my vacation in February or March when it was quieter anyway. I reminded her that I'd had these dates approved for 10 months. I'd bought plane tickets. My parents were expecting me. She brushed that off, saying my parents would understand because they were adults, but she insisted her children needed her there for Christmas morning. She said it was about priorities. I pushed back, telling her my vacation was approved first and that the system existed to avoid this kind of situation. She kept going, asking me to be reasonable. She said she was sure my parents could celebrate with me whenever, and pointed out it wasn't like I had little kids waiting to open presents. I told her flat out that the answer was no. I wasn't giving up my approved vacation time. She stared at me like I just told her the worst thing imaginable. Her face got red, and she turned around and walked straight to the manager's office without another word. Did she really think not having children meant my plans mattered less? That my time with my family was somehow negotiable while hers was sacred? 20 minutes later, I got called into the manager's office. My co-worker was already there, arms crossed, looking confident. The manager said he understood there was a conflict about December vacation time. I told him there shouldn't be a conflict since I'd requested and got approval for those dates 10 months ago. My co-worker jumped in, explaining she'd found an amazing deal that expired soon. She said she needed to book it this week or lose the opportunity. She added that besides, it made more sense for someone with kids to have the holidays off. The manager asked when she'd found this deal. She admitted it was last Friday but insisted that wasn't the point. She repeated that Christmas was more important for families with children. He then asked when she'd submitted her vacation request. She said she was going to do it today after we sorted this out. The manager leaned back in his chair and looked at both of us. He said the policy was clear and that vacation requests were approved on a first-come, first-served basis. He pointed out that the calendar showed the December dates were approved in January. He said there was nothing to sort out here. She protested that this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity and that she'd found a deal that would save them thousands of dollars. The manager agreed that was wonderful, but said it didn't override the existing approved vacation schedule. He told her she'd need to find different dates or pass on this deal. She got louder, saying this was completely unfair and that she had children who needed her at Christmas. The manager explained that having children didn't give anyone priority over approved vacation time. He suggested that if she'd like to request time off for next year's holidays, she should submit that request as early as possible. She stood up so fast her chair rolled backwards. She said she hoped I was happy that I'd ruined Christmas for two little kids. She walked out and slammed the door. I thanked the manager and went back to my desk, but the whole thing left me feeling awful, even though I knew I hadn't done anything wrong. For the rest of that week, she didn't speak to me. She'd walk past my desk without acknowledging me. In meetings, she'd address everyone except me. On Friday, I overheard her talking loudly in the break room about how some people care more about themselves than about children. The following Monday, she was still giving me the silent treatment, but now a few other co-workers had started acting cold toward me, too. She'd been telling everyone her version of the story, painting me as the villain who destroyed her kids' Christmas dreams. Then on Wednesday, the manager sent out an email to the whole office. It was a reminder about the vacation policy and emphasized that all requests are handled fairly based on submission date regardless of personal circumstances. He also mentioned that approved vacation time is final and cannot be challenged by later requests. She didn't come in on Thursday or Friday. When she returned the next Monday, she barely looked at anyone. Turned out she'd spent those days desperately searching for alternative vacation deals, but everything else was triple the price. She'd tried to book the Asia trip anyway with different dates, but her husband had refused because they couldn't afford it without the special pricing. At our next team meeting, she sat in the corner looking miserable. When the manager asked if anyone had updates, she suddenly spoke up. She announced that she wanted everyone to know that because someone refused to be flexible with their vacation plans, her family had lost out on an incredible opportunity. She said some people clearly didn't understand what it meant to sacrifice for others. The manager cut her off immediately. He told her that was enough, and they weren't revisiting this. Everyone in the office followed the same rules. He declared the meeting was over. I took my 2 weeks off in December just as planned. The time with my parents was exactly what I needed. When I got back in January, my co-worker had finally stopped the cold shoulder routine. She never apologized, but at least she stopped acting like I'd personally wronged her. Funny thing is, I found out later that she'd never actually checked if those Asia trip dates were even available before coming to me. She'd just assumed she could strong-arm me into giving up my vacation based on her having kids. The entitlement was unreal. My brother and his wife raised their 5 kids with what I'd call a practical approach to parenting. They had 4 boys first, then their youngest came along when the oldest was already in middle school. Their daughter spent her first 3 years in and out of hospitals with a rare autoimmune condition that had everyone terrified. We all rallied around her during those scary times, and it left its mark on the family. The extended family treated her like she was made of glass even after she got better, showering her with extra attention and gifts. Her parents tried to balance things out by keeping stricter rules at home, but the damage was done in some ways. I'd always been close with all my nieces and nephews, but I had a special bond with her. Maybe it was because I remembered those scary hospital nights, or maybe it was because she reminded me of myself at that age, caught between wanting to be tough and needing to feel special. I worked as a consultant, traveling for business pretty regularly, and I made decent money without kids of my own to spend it on. When her 11th birthday rolled around, she did something that surprised everyone. She asked her mom if the 2 of them could go on a weekend trip together. Just the 2 of them. No dad, no brothers. Just some mother-daughter time. I thought it was sweet. She'd spent her whole life sharing everything with 4 older brothers who were loud and took up a lot of space. Wanting a quiet weekend with her mom seemed reasonable to me. Her parents didn't see it that way. Her mom got upset about the exclusion of the rest of the family. They had this whole conversation about how hurtful it was that she didn't want her dad and brothers there. The trip got cancelled. Her birthday came and went without any celebration at all, which I thought was harsh. She called me crying about it, so I told her I'd take her on the trip myself. We spent a weekend at a beach resort 2 hours away, got our nails done, watched movies in the hotel room, and ate pancakes for dinner. She had a great time. Then last month, one of her brothers turned 15. He announced that for his birthday, he wanted the whole family to go to Mexico for 10 days. Everyone except his sister. When my brother told me about it, I asked him to clarify if the brother had specifically said he didn't want her to come. My brother explained that his son wanted a trip with just the guys in the family, and since she got her trip without them, it was only fair he got one without her. I pointed out that she was 11 and had only asked for one weekend with her mom, while this was 10 days in another country. My brother insisted that fair was fair and then asked if I could watch her while they were gone. I agreed to watch her, but I was furious. When I told her about the Mexico trip, she tried so hard not to cry in front of me. She just nodded and said it was fine, but I could see her lips shaking. That night, I started making phone calls. I had 2 clients I needed to meet with anyway, one in Miami and one in New York. I've been putting off the meetings, but suddenly I had the perfect reason to schedule them. I booked flights, made hotel reservations, and planned out a trip that would blow her mind. I didn't tell her parents the details. I didn't lie exactly, but I definitely didn't volunteer information either. 2 days before they left for Mexico, I mentioned that I had work trips coming up. I told them I had to be in Florida and New York for work during their trip and offered to take her with me. I explained that I'd be working some of the time, but she could hang out at the hotels. My sister-in-law pointed out that it was really last minute, and they didn't have anyone else who could take her for that long. My brother said it would have to work, but told me not to let her interrupt my work. I told them not to worry about it. The morning after they left for Mexico, I told my niece to pack her swimsuit. Her face lit up when I explained that we were going to Florida. We flew out that afternoon, and I watched her press her face against the airplane window the whole way there. We spent 3 days in Miami first. I had one morning meeting, but the rest of the time we were on the beach. She'd never seen the ocean before, and watching her run into the waves made the whole trip worth it. We ate fresh seafood every night and stayed up late watching TV in our hotel room. Then we drove to Orlando. I gotten us tickets to Disney World, which I hadn't told her about. When we pulled into the parking lot and she realized where we were, she actually screamed. We spent an entire day going on rides and eating overpriced theme park food and taking pictures in front of the castle. She wanted to go on Space Mountain 4 times in a row, so we did. After Orlando, we flew to New York. I had 2 days of client meetings there, but I'd scheduled them for mornings only. In the afternoons, we walked around the city. We went to Times Square, ate pizza that she declared was better than anything back home, and I'd gotten us tickets to 2 Broadway shows. She sat on the edge of her seat through both of them, completely mesmerized. On our flight home, we got randomly upgraded to first class. She kept talking about the warm cookies they gave us and how the seats turned into beds. When we landed, she gave me the biggest hug and told me it was the best week of her entire life. I dropped her off at home an hour before her parents got back from Mexico. She promised not to say anything until they asked, but I knew that wouldn't last long. Within 2 days, my phone started blowing up. My sister-in-law called first, asking if I was kidding about taking her to Disney World in New York. I explained that I had work meetings and brought her along so they wouldn't have to find childcare. My brother called next, telling me I had completely undermined them. He said they were teaching her a lesson about not excluding family, and I threw it in their faces. I asked what lesson exactly, pointing out that her brother could exclude her for 10 days in Mexico, but she couldn't have a weekend with her mom. My sister-in-law insisted it wasn't the same thing at all, and told me I spoiled her on purpose to make them look bad. The calls kept coming. They told me I couldn't have unsupervised visits with her anymore, which was complicated since I was their regular after-school babysitter. They still needed me 3 days a week when they were at work, but suddenly I couldn't take her anywhere or do anything fun. Then they started calling other family members, spinning this story about how I'd taken their daughter across the country without permission, because I was mad about her punishment for being rude. I still pick her up from school on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. We do homework at my kitchen table, and I make her snacks. She tells me about her day and shows me drawings she made. Her parents pick her up at 6 o'clock sharp, and I don't get to see her otherwise. Last week she asked me when we were going on another adventure, and I had to tell her it might be a while. Her face fell when I said that. But here's the thing I know, and they don't. She keeps a journal now, and she wrote down every single detail of our trip. Every ride at Disney World, every beach sunset, every Broadway song. When she's older and looks back at being 11, she's not going to remember being left behind. She's going to remember that someone thought she deserved an adventure. About 6 months ago, I decided to get a tattoo on my shoulder. Nothing crazy or offensive, just a phoenix rising from flames. It represents overcoming a rough period in my life after losing my job at an advertising firm 2 years back. That whole experience nearly broke me, but I rebuilt myself from scratch, learned new skills, and started freelancing. The tattoo means something personal to me. I've been putting off getting my hair trimmed for weeks because I've been swamped with client work. My hair had gotten so long that it was driving me nuts, constantly getting in my face while I worked. Last Tuesday, I finally booked an appointment at this salon I'd been going to for the past year. Nothing fancy, just a small local place run by this really sweet woman who always remembers how I like my hair cut. I showed up right on time wearing a tank top because it was hot outside and the AC in my car had decided to quit working that morning. The phoenix tattoo was visible on my left shoulder, but I didn't think twice about it. I'd worn tank tops to this salon before without any issues. The owner greeted me with her usual warm smile and led me to her station. We chatted about how business was going, and I was telling her about this new client I'd landed when I heard someone clear their throat loudly behind me. I looked in the mirror and saw this middle-aged woman sitting in the waiting area, staring directly at me with her face all scrunched up like she'd just bitten into a lemon. I asked if I could help her with something. She told me that the thing on my shoulder was absolutely disgusting. I blinked, genuinely confused for a second. I asked if she meant my tattoo. She confirmed that yes, she meant my tattoo, and went on to say it was offensive and inappropriate. She said I shouldn't be allowed in public places looking like that. The owner stopped what she was doing with my hair and turned around. She told the woman that there was nothing wrong with my tattoo and asked her not to harass other clients. The woman insisted she wasn't harassing anyone and was simply stating facts. She claimed my tattoo was demonic and offensive to good Christians like herself. I tried to ignore her and focus on my reflection in the mirror, but she kept going. She rambled on about how people like me were ruining society with devil worship and disrespect for traditional values. I told her it was just a phoenix and wasn't even religious. She snapped at me not to talk back to her. Then she demanded I leave the salon right away and never come back. She claimed I was making everyone uncomfortable with my offensive body art. The owner told her that she needed to stop. She said I'd done nothing wrong and the woman had no right to tell customers to leave. The woman responded by saying that if I wouldn't leave, she'd make me leave. She stood up from her chair, and that's when I saw her reach into her purse. My stomach dropped when she pulled out a pocket knife and flicked it open. She threatened that if I wouldn't cover up that offensive garbage or leave, she'd carve it right off my shoulder herself. Everything seemed to move in slow motion. The owner immediately jumped between us, putting herself directly in front of me. Her hands were shaking, but her voice was steady. She ordered the woman to put the knife away and leave the salon before she called the police. The woman refused, saying she wasn't going anywhere until I left first. The owner pointed out that she just threatened a customer with a weapon and needed to leave immediately. The woman insisted that I was the one who needed to leave. She argued that she'd been there first and shouldn't have to look at my disgusting tattoo while she waited for her appointment. The owner pulled out her phone and started dialing. The woman started screaming about how she was being discriminated against for her religious beliefs. Then she did something I absolutely did not expect. She grabbed a bottle of hair product from the nearest station and threw it across the room. It hit the mirror on the opposite wall, shattering it into pieces. Then she started sweeping things off the counters, bottles and combs and scissors clattering everywhere. She knocked over a standing hairdryer, grabbed handfuls of magazines from the waiting area, and threw them around like confetti. The owner announced that the police were on their way and suggested the woman stop destroying her property. The woman screamed that nobody could tell her what to do. She yelled about discrimination and claimed she was the victim. She grabbed another bottle and threw it at the window. The whole time she was still holding that knife in her other hand, waving it around while she trashed the place. The other stylist who worked there had already rushed her client out the back door. I stayed frozen in the chair, not wanting to make any sudden moves, while this woman was armed and clearly unhinged. The police showed up within 5 minutes. 2 officers walked in to find the woman in the middle of throwing a chair. She actually tried to charge at one of the officers with the knife still in her hand. That was a mistake. The officer sidestepped her easily and his partner grabbed her from behind. They had her on the ground and in handcuffs within seconds. She was screaming the entire time about religious persecution and how she was going to sue everyone. One of the officers came over to check if I was okay while his partner hauled the woman out to their car. She was still yelling when they pushed her head down and got her into the back seat. Through the salon's front window, I could see people on the street stopping to stare and pull out their phones to record. The officer asked if she'd actually threatened me with a knife. I confirmed that yes, she'd said she would carve my tattoo off if I didn't leave. The owner backed me up, saying she'd seen the whole thing. She explained how the woman had pulled the knife and threatened me, then refused to leave when told to. She added that was when the woman started destroying the salon. The officer took our statements and collected the knife as evidence. He mentioned something about charges for assault with a deadly weapon, terroristic threats, and destruction of property. The woman had quite the record of similar incidents at other businesses around town. After the police left, I helped the owner clean up the mess. She refused to charge me for the haircut, even though we managed to finish it once everything calmed down. She told me I was welcome anytime and apologized for what happened, even though none of it was her fault. I drove home that afternoon with a fresh haircut and a story I knew nobody would believe without proof. The salon's security camera caught everything. The owner sent me the footage later that week after the police released it back to her. The woman ended up spending the night in jail and facing multiple felony charges. I've had the same best friend since 1995 when we both started our first real jobs. We clicked right away and stayed close over the years. Even after he moved to another state, we'd talk every few months, send Christmas cards, the usual stuff people do to keep friendships alive across distance. His wife joined the picture about 10 years ago, and she seemed nice enough the handful of times we'd all gotten together at weddings or reunions. When he called last month saying they'd be in town for a work conference and asked if they could crash at my place from Sunday through Thursday morning, I didn't think twice about it. I've got a spare bedroom, my kids know them from past visits, and it seemed like it would be fun to catch up properly. My son is 6 and my daughter just turned 3, and they were actually excited about having guests. They showed up Sunday afternoon with their suitcases and a bag of groceries as a thank you gift. The first few hours were fine. We ordered pizza, let the kids stay up a bit late, talked about old times. But then, after the kids went to bed, my friend started making these weird comments. He was looking around my living room and made some remark about where he'd be sleeping, saying he'd hoped it would be in my bed with me. I felt my stomach twist with discomfort, but tried to laugh it off. I pointed to the spare room and told him that's where he and his wife would be staying. He kept pushing the joke, acting disappointed and saying he'd thought we'd have a more interesting arrangement. His wife rolled her eyes but didn't say anything to stop him. The next morning at breakfast, he brought it up again in front of my kids. He mentioned how he wished he could stay in my room instead of the spare bedroom. My son looked confused and my daughter didn't understand what he meant, but I wasn't about to let this continue. I told him to stop making those kinds of jokes. I said it wasn't appropriate, especially in front of my children. He brushed me off and said he was just messing around, that I knew he didn't mean anything by it. I repeated that I was serious and needed him to stop. He held up his hands like I was overreacting, but he backed off for the rest of the day. I had to work from home on Monday and Tuesday, so I was mostly in my home office while they did their own thing. His wife went out both days to meet up with their mutual friends in the area. He just slept until noon or later, then wandered around my house eating my food and watching my television. Wednesday is when everything fell apart. His wife left around 10 in the morning to spend the day with one of their friends. I was on a video call when I heard my friend finally get up around 1 in the afternoon. I finished my meeting and went to the kitchen to make lunch for my kids. That's when he hit me with it. He said his wife's friend needed a place to crash tonight, and he told this person they could stay at my house. He asked if that was cool, like it was already decided. I asked him what he was talking about and who this person was. He explained it was his wife's friend, the guy she'd been hanging out with the past couple days. His name was Alex. I told him I'd never met this person before. He said that was true, but they knew him and he was cool. This guy's living situation was really cramped, and he just needed one night to get away from it all. I apologized but told him no. I said I didn't know this guy and wasn't comfortable with a stranger staying in my house with my kids. His wife jumped in then and said he wasn't a stranger to them. She said they'd known him for years. I told her that didn't change the fact that he was a stranger to me and my children. My friend pushed back and told me not to be like that. He said he wouldn't bring anyone dangerous around my kids and I should know that about him. I said that wasn't the point. The answer was no. His wife tried again, insisting this guy wasn't some creep or anything like that. She said he was a normal guy who just needed a place to stay for one night. I repeated that I'd said no and this wasn't up for discussion. Then my friend dropped the bomb that they'd already kind of told this Alex person he could stay here. I felt my blood pressure spike. I told them they needed to untell him because it wasn't happening. They both stared at me like I was being unreasonable. My daughter was in the living room playing with her toys and my son was at the table coloring. I kept my voice level. I said I've been more than accommodating letting them both stay here for several days, but I drew the line at having someone I'd never met spend the night in my home with my young children. I said that wasn't negotiable. My friend said he really thought I was overreacting. He brought up how we'd been friends for almost 30 years, like that should change my mind. I told him that in those 30 years, he should know me well enough to understand that I take my kids' safety seriously. I repeated the answer was no, and honestly, I was getting close to asking them both to leave early if they couldn't respect that simple boundary. There was this tense silence where they looked at each other. His wife grabbed her phone and stepped outside to make a call. He stood there for another minute like he wanted to argue more, but I just stared back at him without backing down. I wasn't going to budge on this. About 20 minutes later, he came back into the kitchen where I was making sandwiches for lunch. He said they'd decided to get a hotel for the rest of the visit. I simply said, okay. He added that they'd pack up and head out tonight. I told him that was fine. I didn't try to talk them out of it. Honestly, I felt relieved. They packed their stuff while avoiding eye contact with me, said awkward goodbyes to my kids, and left around 6 that evening. My house felt lighter the moment the door closed behind them. The next day, his wife sent me a long text about how hurt they were that I didn't trust their judgment about their friend. She wrote about how they thought our friendship meant more than that and how disappointed they were in me. I read the whole thing, deleted it without responding, and blocked both their numbers. My kids asked a few times over the next week when our friends were coming back. I told them they had to leave early for work stuff and probably wouldn't be visiting again. My son seemed sad for about 5 minutes before getting distracted by something else. My daughter forgot about it entirely by the next day. I haven't regretted the decision once. If 30 years of friendship means they can't respect a simple boundary about keeping strangers away from my children, then it wasn't much of a friendship to begin with. About 15 years ago, I moved to Redmond, Washington, chasing a better job opportunity in the tech sector. The town was built around Microsoft, and I figured being close to all that innovation would be good for my career. I found a decent rental house in a quiet neighborhood, nothing fancy but affordable on my entry-level salary. My new address sat just a few blocks from both Microsoft's main campus and the Nintendo of America offices. The house was perfect for a single guy trying to save money. 2 bedrooms, small yard, recently renovated kitchen. I signed the lease without hesitation and started moving my stuff in over a long weekend. By Sunday night, I had the basics set up and decided to get the phone line activated. Back then, everyone still had landlines. Cell phones existed but were expensive, and most people kept a home phone for important calls. The phone company came out on Monday morning to activate the line. The technician plugged everything in, tested it, and left. About 10 minutes later, the phone rang. I picked it up, expecting maybe the phone company doing a follow-up check. Instead, some kid asked me about being stuck on level 3 of Super Mario and not being able to find the warp zone. I told him he had the wrong number and hung up. 5 minutes later, it rang again. A different kid explained that his Game Boy wouldn't turn on and he'd just gotten it for his birthday. I told him this wasn't Nintendo and hung up again. Then it rang again, and again, and again. By that evening, I'd received maybe 30 calls. All of them were kids or confused parents asking about video game problems. Some wanted refunds. Some wanted technical support. One guy wanted to know when the next Zelda game was coming out. It didn't stop when I went to bed either. The phone rang at 11 p.m., then at 1 a.m., then at 3 a.m. I was losing my mind. The next morning, exhausted and furious, I called the phone company. The representative answered and asked how she could help. I explained that I needed my phone number changed right away because I was getting nonstop calls for Nintendo. She told me there was a $75 fee to change my number, and they couldn't guarantee the new number wouldn't have similar issues. I asked if she was kidding me. Her company had given me a number that used to belong to a business, and that wasn't my fault. She said she understood my frustration, but company policy was clear. The fee applied to all number changes requested by customers. I explained that I'd just moved here and didn't have an extra $75 lying around for a problem they created. She apologized but said there was nothing she could do. She wasn't sorry at all. I could hear it in her voice. I hung up and stared at the phone, which started ringing again right away. Something snapped in my brain. If I couldn't get rid of the number, I'd make this everyone else's problem until the phone company fixed it. I picked up the next call. Some kid said he needed help with Donkey Kong Country. I told him sure thing, but first I'd need a credit card for our premium support service. He seemed confused and said Nintendo didn't charge for help. I told him it was a new policy and to go grab his mom's credit card from her purse. He said okay, and I heard him drop the phone and run off. A minute later he was back. He told me he had it and I asked him to read me the number and the name on the card. He did. I didn't write anything down. I just listened and then hung up. The calls kept coming and I kept asking for credit cards. Some kids would go get them. Others would bring their parents to the phone. One angry parent demanded to know what I thought I was doing, asking her kid for credit card information. I told her it was good she was there and thanked her for the purchase earlier. I explained we'd charged $500 to her card for the gold support package. She asked what I was talking about and said she didn't authorize anything. I told her to take it up with her credit card company and slam the phone down. Sometimes they'd call back and I'd get even more creative. Another angry parent said she was going to have me fired and that this was unacceptable. I thanked her for calling back but gave her bad news that her card was declined because it was maxed out. I suggested maybe she should stop buying so much stuff. More screaming, more hang-ups, more calls. One time a dad called back 3 times in a row, getting angrier each time. On the third call, I thanked him for buying me a new TV and asked if he could throw in a VCR too, since I was redecorating my living room with his money. The calls came at all hours. 2 in the morning, I'd answer half asleep and just start spouting nonsense about credit cards and pizza toppings and anything else that popped into my head. If someone asked about a game, I'd give them completely wrong instructions that would probably delete their save file or brick their console. This went on for about 3 weeks. I knew I was being terrible. Some of the things I said were way over the line, even by the standards of the time. But I was so tired and so frustrated that I stopped caring. My logic was simple. If I made enough people angry, someone would complain to Nintendo, and Nintendo would complain to the phone company. Then one afternoon the phone rang and it wasn't a kid or a parent. Someone from the phone company's regional office introduced himself as a manager. He explained that they'd be changing my phone number at no charge and the new number would be active tomorrow. I asked why the sudden change of heart. He said they'd received several complaints that were forwarded to them through Nintendo. There was some confusion about the number assignment. He apologized for the inconvenience. I thanked him and hung up feeling relieved. The new number worked perfectly. No more middle-of-the-night wake-up calls. No more confused parents. Just peace and quiet. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.